Dun 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 dun. Welcome to the Say Report, which is now going to be officially an unsolved mystery report. I don't know why I sang the Law and Order theme. It
That
just
wasn't
occurred to me
Law
that
and
was
Order. You know what that was? That
what was that?
was Shout. I think is the name of it because all I wanted to do is ooh ooh ooh.
Yeah, well, I wanted to to dive a little bit into some weirdness that's been going on. I realized that we had gone a couple of weeks without mentioning this, and it's weird that I didn't mention it, like in the fact that it is now a not just a national thing, but a worldwide thing. I am Sejohn Survey of the State Report. I am here with my co-host and my co detective Devon Decker.
I thought we said host companion. I know it
A
makes
host
Optimus
companion. Nope,
Prime
nope.
blush,
Nope,
but
sorry. No,
I
you're totally right. Proper titles are important. But I'm just too excited, man. We have not really talked about the monolith.
no, we didn't. And it's good that you are remembering something we should have talked about because there's something that I remembered that we need to talk about. So, no, we didn't talk about the monolith that has originally appeared in your home state of residency,
Yeah,
Utah.
not even an hour away from my home, actually. Yeah, yeah.
I was afraid to bring it up with you because, like, it's one of those things
Because it might
where,
have been me.
no, I knew it wasn't you, and I can tell you why, but I don't want to drag your name through the mud in this in this episode of the Say Report. There's time and a place for that, but it's not here. But yeah, then another one showed up in Rome, and that was
Yeah.
something. And then a third one that is clearly man-made and not aliens showed up in Rhode Island, and that one was me. I'll
Was it
just
made out of
take the
Pabst Blue
claim.
Ribbon
Right?
cans or something? Like
Oh, it's
sorry,
awful.
Gansett cans in your area.
It's like oh, it's made of driftwood, another monolith, and it's like no, that's bullshit. That's not another monolith.
Oh God, that's closer to like the murder totem in Hannibal than it is to the monolith in Utah. But yeah, man, it was a weird time. It was up, and everybody was like excited to talk about it. And this is the thing that happens in Utah is like something weird will happen, and then everybody's very excited to talk about it because they act like nothing exciting ever happens in Utah. I
You say
actually
that as if
have.
Mormonism didn't come from Utah.
I
Joseph
actually
Smith had an angel, the Moroni, come to him and say, Jesus didn't live over in the Middle East. He lived here in
How do you
Utah.
know? Well, I have these gold tablets. Can we see these gold tablets? No, 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 no. Please, we really want to read them. Oh, you couldn't if you did. Even if I showed them to you, you wouldn't be able to read
I
them.
will,
You have to put them in a special hat in order to read them.
and you have to have a special stone in the special hat, one of two special stones, in case I lose the first stone.
What was the first one? But there's a few other unsolved mysteries in Utah, and I really wanted to talk about them today because I feel like you and I probably have the brains to really kind of talk about them, and probably solve them.
Oh, okay.
So
Is this wait? Before we go into these unsolved mysteries of Utah,
mhm.
is are these like the seven unproven equations where if we solve any one of them, we'll become like known worldwide as great not mathematicians in this scenario, but sleuthers?
Well, here, let's talk about this first one that I have
Oh
here, and you
god.
can tell me at the end of it if you think these are real, truly unsolved mysteries that need to be solved or not. Uh, so, so we have just to be, to give credit where credit is due. I am reading an article titled "Eight Disturbing Mysteries in Utah." Um, Whatever happened to John Baptiste? So this is a true story. John Baptiste was a grave robber. He would steal all sorts of like jewelry and like clothing off of people and then like resell them and things like
He
that.
would rob
Uh, sup-
graves. I mean,
Supposedly hit more than 300 graves in his time. He was sentenced in 1862 and was going to be sent to prison, but citizens were so outraged that they decided they were just going to kill him. And local law enforcement at the time was like, "That's not really how we do things." Um, Nice to hear that that was kind of the mindset. So they decided to run him off in like in the middle of the night and like put him on an island out in the middle of the Salt Lakes, right? And they left him there, and they went back to go check on him 3 weeks later. And when they went to go check on him, he had disappeared. It wasn't until years later where human remains, unidentified, were discovered at the island with giant iron clamps around one of the legs in order to like keep it down. Um, But the evidence that this was not John Baptiste was simply, well, John Baptiste did not have iron around his leg when we left him, and so it clearly could not be him. So now it's considered an unsolved mystery. Now, Devin, I don't think that we're the smartest people in the world by far.
I mean,
but
do,
I think,
but
I
you,
think,
you can, be humble all you want over there. But I think I'm one of the greatest minds of our generation. I can't believe I just said that on our podcast. I really liked that show Scorpion because as much as it was an adaptation of the life and times of Walter, I forget his last name, Walter O'Brien, maybe?
I was going to say Goggins, so you got me. But
Not
yeah,
Walton, Walter, of the guy from Ireland who would then later work for NASA and be in a Scorpion-esque think tank for the U.S. government. Walter O'Brien, I'm pretty sure is his name. You can look that up, I'm sure, at some point during the show and prove me wrong or not. As much as it was an adaptation of his life, I also felt like some Devon Decker made his way into there. Couple of traits from characters like Sylvester and Toby. Like, I mean, that's a Devon Decker. If Devon Decker existed and they put him through a centrifuge, on one end you'd get Toby, portrayed by Eddie K. Thomas, Finch from the American Pie films, and on the other you'd get Sylvester. So, like, I just feel that way. But I'm being a jerk. No, so John Baptiste, I honestly... there's two ways that mystery could go. Are we? Is this how like Serial started? I kind of feel like we're like, let's branch into a whole new genre with the murder podcasts. The Say Murder. But yeah, it's one of those things. Driving it all together. There's a chance that body was his. And that someone there's two. Someone rode out to that island and then was like, "You're gonna die for your sins. You're not getting this free reign of this island. Here, I'm clamping iron around your leg, and now you can't reach that food." Like, I could see it as like a real pain. 3 weeks is a long time to torture somebody that apparently everybody wanted to kill, and the police had to be like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let the state of Utah become murderers.
Yep.
So there's that situation. But actually, what I find far more likely, because it was years later that they discovered this, right? Do we know the size of the island?
So it is, let me do this. It's Fremont Island. So it is about, think like a block island. Like it is large enough that it could have had like a town on it. But it just, they never settled there, but like large enough that like a town could have settled there. So you could have had a good decent sized population living there of people, but not big enough that people felt the need to settle there, if that gives you an idea.
Yeah, that helps. I guess the reason I ask is because, like, it's an island. If you lose a dude who is responsible for 300 grave robberies, like, you could probably find him in the afternoon, maybe a weekend. And for real, what you do is you have a barbecue and search party on the beach of Fremont Island. And everybody arrives at 8 a.m. And then we all go out into the woods looking for the body, the man that we've lost, John Baptiste. And then we come back at noon and have a barbecue lunch that couldn't be beat. And then we go out again until about 6, have another party, and then we have a big bonfire on the beach. Even if this guy, right, is not dead somewhere, the hunger and the sound from the beach, he'd probably come running. Because all this time in isolation on the beach, he doesn't have the packages that Castaway had. Castaway at least had packages.
Yeah, right. He didn't have Wilson. But also on top of that, as far as he knew, at least, like, the police were on his side. They were the ones that were like, hey, we're going to protect you. So if they show up and they start calling your name out, you don't hide from them.
Right. So,
oh man.
So I mean, how many years later did they find those remains?
About 3 years after he.
So someone else murdered somebody on that island, and those remains do not belong to John Baptiste. I actually applaud the detective working. Well, he didn't have a big fucking iron shackle on his leg, so it's probably not him.
The last time we saw him, he didn't have anything around his foot, so clearly this can't be him.
Yeah. Because like,
yeah.
who gets left on an island and then's like, well, you know, I'm going to put a shackle of iron on my leg. That's step one to my great escape and my new life here.
Now, okay, so as much as this one dips into like serial territory, we got to go into some Unsolved territory, some BuzzFeed territory here for a second for this next one.
Okay, but I want to finish this. What really happened is this guy was like, Great Salt Lake, my ass. I robbed 300 graves. I can swim ashore, and he did pretty good job. I mean, you know how hard. I mean, this is oldie times, right? Like this isn't modern times.
People have swum across the English Canal,
the English Channel,
centuries.
Yes,
Channel.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm not even talking about the English Channel. I'm speaking about the man, John Baptiste, to dig up a grave. Right? I imagine at the time it was probably still the 6 feet down digging that they were doing. Like bodies were down there.
So anybody this is a weird sentence I'm about to say that I never thought I said, but anybody that gets real into looking into grave robbing will tell you that, like, it really kind of depends. If the person could afford a nice funeral, then yes, but obviously if they were just like a homeless person on the street, more often than not, they either got burned or they got buried in shallow graves.
They're called paupers' graves. 2 CBS shows referenced them in 2020 as real things that are happening because the world's on fire. How about yours? I don't really like it, and I'm bored at this point. I'm just gonna say it. Come get me, Smash Mouth. But
Shrek sheds a tear. But yeah, go ahead.
But the reason why I say that is, I mean, obviously, if you're grave robbing, you want to hit the grave while it's fresh, right? So the afternoon, they bury the body, they have the service. You're there probably about 11 p.m. is like the earliest you'd want to start grave robbing. And then it's still fresh soil, so it's not compacted or anything like that, so you're able to get down to the grave in order to steal all the valuables. But you're still talking about a substantial amount of physical labor that would need to be put on the shoulders of John Baptiste. So in addition to the fact that people have swum across the English Channel for so long, there is the fact that this guy, he's probably built. Like, he's probably, like, a good-looking dude. I'm thinking, like, John Cena in my head, though, obviously, because of the name, Dave Bautista was the first thought. But he's probably more of a John Cena build.
But you know, that typically sexy grave robber that you see in all of the movies, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. If we're writing the adaptation of this, John Cena as John Baptiste, sexy grave robber of the Salt Lake.
I don't know. Andy Serkis is really kind of hitting me as a grave robber. I wonder why that is. But anyway.
But either way, this guy probably thought, I can swim ashore and I'm free. I'm home free. Everybody thinks I'm on this island. Nobody's going to miss me. And then either he made it to shore and then, you know, westward ho, and he made it to California and did something else with his life, or he overestimated his ability to swim across the Great Salt Lake and he drowned, and his remains are somewhere at the bottom of what is, by all accounts, pretty much a still unexplored lake, right? Like, we don't know what could be down there.
That's fair. It's very unexplored, but one of the big things about it is that it is quite salty. And so one of the things, yeah, I mean, like, that's a joke, but also, like, it actually is really easy to swim in the Salt Lake because, like,
because of buoyancy. I understand that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still a little thrown off by the lack of acknowledgement of my Burke and Hare reference, but
I'm sorry. You gave me a mystery and said, Devon, I think we could solve this mystery, and I love this.
but John Baptiste leaving the island is clearly one of the possible options. To me, I gotta be honest, I thought we were gonna go the route of 3 weeks later, this guy found, well, like, the guy disappears, and then we find a dead body with iron shackles around him. Pretty clear what happened to John Baptiste is that the people that were pissed that they were like, we're gonna kill this dude, I mean, straight up lynch this dude, let's be honest, them like getting out to this island themselves, it would be pretty easy to, like, they didn't rush him off to, like, another state. He's not off in, like, the Idaho mountains somewhere. Like, he's just across this water that, let's be honest, we also all have, like, boats on and stuff.
And I understand where you're
man.
coming from with that thought, but I think that you overestimate people's enthusiasm to murder this person. Because,
Yep, that's
like,
fair.
people don't want to go more than 15 minutes. I mean, this is Rhode Island, but people don't like to travel a long time for, like, essential items. Murder is most gratuitous. Of the, like, pleasures that we can derive as human beings, murdering someone is pretty low down that list. So I just feel like, we gotta go we gotta go to first of all, we gotta get to the Salt Lake, and then we gotta go to Fremont Island. Let him die out there. That's
I don't
fine.
disagree. Here's the one thing I will say to this. Mormons have a lot of time on their hand. It's one thing that I've learned moving out here.
Sejohn, are you looking to leave Utah? Because I feel like you're throwing a lot of shade on the state that has welcomed you in these past 2 years. And based on everything that you're telling me about the residents, this is the type of stuff they might run you off, or, God forbid, leave you on some island to die.
I have to say that I have listened to a lot of talk over the election cycle. It happens every election cycle. Actually, it happens every even minor election cycle with Congress and stuff every 2 years. You hear a lot about the bullshit of flyover states and about how the idea that, like, oh, they're just ignored and left behind, which is nonsense. They are not. Listen to what some people say, and they are actually some of the most catered to, kowtowed like states in every election cycle. And the idea that Utah is considered an ignored flyover state is ridiculous. When people talk about the idea of people making their money work for them, like, every person I've met in Utah, like, that is what you're running into. That is not to say that there is not a working class or lower here. Salt Lake City has one of the highest homeless rates in the country, and I'm not gonna ever ignore that. But when people talk about the idea of like I'm just gonna go live in a mountain villa and not pay any attention to what my money's doing, I just take $100,000 out every year, and like every time I look, I have an extra million. So like that is Utah.
There's a reason why Sundance happens in Utah. I
Park
get
City
it.
is like epitome of what I'm talking about right now. Yes, for sure. Yeah, man. So there's this idea that, like, you're on the one hand, you're not wrong, because Mormons don't like to do a lot of work, but on the other hand, that Mormons also have a lot of free time on their hands. So if something gets in their craw, like, they stick to it and they do it, much to the detriment of everyone around them. But yeah.
I mean, I understand that, it's one of the big commandments is thou shalt not steal. I understand that it's right up there with, like, do not covet thy neighbor's goods or wife, which it's weird that those are two separate things.
Well, right.
But
I don't know if I guess it's better than considering their wife one of their goods. I
think that's why it bothers me, is because we know how rampantly misogynistic the Bible was. And it really does kind of reek of, ooh, we need to change this. We need to make sure. Like, God came down and he's like,
was like, this right here might be a little too on the nose.
I can imagine God and Moses up there on Mount Sinai, and Moses is like, these 9 commandments. And God's like, hey, this commandment, we're going to separate it. And Moses is like, why?
Why?
And God's like, exactly. Trust me. You're
like,
gonna.
Why you're not in the promised land, asshole?
This is why those idiots are celebrating a golden cow that they built right now. Because you don't trust in me, Moses.
Oh, man.
And then Moses supposes his toes are roses.
Yeah,
probably.
It might have been their most sacrilegious episode. Oh, man.
This is because you bring up mysteries. And mysteries make me, hand to God, mysteries like this, of this semi-supernatural nature, make me my most atheistic. I believe in nothing but science whenever we have one of these discussions. In fact, I was going to talk to you about this off mic, but I'd like to do it here. And by no means, I mean, we've made tons of promises on the Say Report, so you are not tied by this. But sometime when all of the pandemic nonsense is over, right, and the world returns to a semi-shape of normalcy, I'd really like to go down to New Orleans with you, and if he's available, William, and take the ghost tour that Will and I took.
Yes.
Because
Please, yes.
yeah, okay, good. I figured you'd be down for it. Will raves about that ghost tour, and I the entire time was just coming up with logical science proof-based explanations for every single haunting.
Well, fear takes a different shape within us all, Devon.
That's
So
true.
you needed to hide behind science in order to not pee yourself. I get it.
ain't afraid of no ghosts. I was raised on Ghostbusters. And busting makes me feel good. But no, I would really like to take that tour with you, because that's the thing, is that once I become like there's no faith in anything and there is only science, then obviously, like, it's not that far a jump to go into sacrilege.
Yeah, of course. No, it's right. At that point, you're just like, well, this is nonsense. And it's really hard for me to treat your perception of reality with the respect that I should, because I cannot fathom that there's a literal term for that in academia called differend, with a D at the end. And it is like, I cannot get past this point. You and I see so oppositely on this issue that there is no way that I can even pretend to empathize with your point of view, because we are so separate on this issue. And yeah, man, this
it reminds me of two things. First of all, I do like that as I am being super scientifically focused on this, I am agreeing to the belief of God, because God is definitely the one who's like, women are not things, Moses.
Oh, man.
You have the space on the tablet. Women are not things. I'm believing in a God who would have to point that out to Moses, despite the fact that Moses just liberated his people from being treated as literal things by the Pharisees.
Look, all heroes have flaws.
That's what makes them relatable. Nobody would care about Spider-Man if he wasn't bullied as Peter Parker. But the second thing, the second thing is I'm reminded of, we were watching an episode of SWAT last Christmas season, and it was a bunch of cult people who were prepared to jump off of a building because their leader said so, and the SWAT people stopped them, and then it went to commercial, and my mother said, "How those people are crazy. How could they ever believe that?" And then I'm like, "You're about to celebrate the star, baby, ma. So like, glass houses. All religion is in glass houses."
And Devon celebrated that Christmas out in the cold.
No, I celebrated the star, baby, with the rest of the family.
Oh, man.
Because I didn't want to spend it out in the cold. But yeah, no, John Baptiste, to bring it all back together, he either escaped or was killed on that island.
Yeah, well, just to I need to, because I only because I made this promise 20 minutes ago and need to actually finish it. Like, just to give you another clue of what people out here consider to be an unsolved mystery of Utah. There's the mystery of, I gotta get this right, the monster of Bear Lake, in which a John C. Rich reported seeing in 1868 a serpentine creature about 30 feet long. Now, it's important to note that Rich recanted this story, but the legend still sticks around and people talk about it to this day.
Wow. If there is not a bigger proof positive moment for humanity than that actually didn't happen. And people being like, "The fuck it didn't? Why would you say it if you didn't? Who is funding you?"
Yeah, who's paying you?
Is it the glasses people? I have this whole conspiracy about the Vision Illuminati, which they could probably just be called the Illuminati. In fact, I've solved it. The people that I was calling Big Vision earlier this morning, they're just the Illuminati. Because Gail on CBS this morning, she has a coordinated pair of glasses for her outfit every day. So like,
Devon, you worked in the entertainment industry. You know what a costume designer is.
I do know what a costume designer is, but it's not a costume designer who's making those glasses every day. They need to be supplied by somebody, and it has to be Big Vision, aka the Illuminati. So Gail King is definitely pushing the agenda of Big Vision, aka the Illuminati. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. See, the problem is, here's the big problem. Speaking of unsolved mysteries, though these are now solved mysteries, Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island, has been on a pause for the last week, and there's another week coming. Began on the 30th of November, and it goes to December 13th. And the hope is that by forcing a quarantine on the population of the state, it will curb the COVID-19 incidents that are happening in the state. Because Rhode Island, we're not in the best shape, as it were. Our hospitals are at capacity. We've built 2 field hospitals. Things aren't going great. So part of that pause is that I need to work from home because I'm able to. If you're able to work from home is the specific language in the pause for Rhode Island. So I've been working from home, and in working from home, I've learned a lot about my father. Such that he watches...
Yeah, been around him a bit extra than you used to be, yeah.
Such as that he swears up and down by CBS Sunday Morning, and that Gayle King does not wear glasses for the 6 to 8 o'clock, but then from 8 o'clock on, she puts on a pair of color-coordinated glasses for her outfit. Like, that's the thing that he comments on every day. And it's, so, like, you notice that stuff. He also watches 4 hours of Family Feud, which is 8 episodes of Family Feud, which is more Family Feud than anyone should have to watch in a week, let alone
more
in
than
a
anyone
day.
Should, like doctors prescribed watching less than that. Yeah, no, like that is unhealthy. I will point out that he is talking about Gayle King, who does the morning and the midday, right? So that means
Oprah's best friend, Gayle King.
Right, yeah. So she, so just to be clear, she clearly wakes up at what is probably conservatively 4 a.m. in order to like get her shit together, get to work, and like get to work. So that means that what is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon to her is more like 8 o'clock in the evening to us, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, you say that, but the morning show, they were waking up at 3:30 and then not going to bed until midnight, and I'm like, that's cool. I did that in college.
Right, but even more to my point, I know many well, I was gonna say visionary person with vision issues to consider throughout the day. That by the end of the day they just put the fucking glasses on. It's been a rough day. Maybe they made it through reading one too many cards and they're just realizing like they got to take their contacts out. Like anybody other that wears contacts knows these things. Like sometimes you got to take a break from those. So I applaud your father's detective work in noting that she is clearly like a different like in a different costume at the end of in the afternoon show or the midday show, but it is clearly that she has just got to that point of the day where she don't give a fuck. Right
But I'm the one who's introducing some nefarious Illuminati plot to provide her with visionware in exchange for pushing. I mean, she's also best friends with Oprah. Like, let's not downplay that fact. But no, the Family Feud is what I want to focus on, because one of the questions on Family Feud that I have been unable to have escape from my mind over the past week is...
People really like... Oh, sorry. Wait. I was going to ask, do people really like Steve Harvey, or is that just all part of the Illuminati plot, too? That's my question about that.
I can't talk about Steve Harvey on this show without
No, then let's pretend we're talking about Al, or even Louis Anderson. We could talk about Louis Anderson.
Yeah, but it's Steve Harvey, and we're just not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about Steve Harvey. American Dad did a fine job dressing down Steve Harvey in their 300th episode. Not necessarily exactly what I would have done, Kevin. But
yeah. What? You want to watch Life with Louie? It's great. It's on DVD now.
Is it really on DVD? Can I watch Life with Louie right now? Don't fucking
DVDs.
lie to me, Louis Anderson Sejohn. Louis Anderson. I don't know. I don't want to do it again. We all got the joke. But the question on Family Feud that has bothered me since is, when I die, I'm going straight to hell, but it's okay because I placked plenty of blank. That was the question that was asked of 100 people, and the top 8 answers are on the board.
Fucking crazy. That is the craziest Family Feud question I have ever heard in my life.
Yeah. So that's crazy. And then, because craziness begets craziness, when the family had answered all except for 2 answers on the board, so the last woman comes up, they have 2 strikes, so they've exhausted all the choices, and she says toilet paper.
Sorry, that's a phenomenal answer. Before you tell me whether or not it was on the board, I'm gonna say A, it should have been, and secondly, I want to hug that woman.
It was not on the board.
Boo.
But what has bothered me about that is, when you are dead, do you defecate? like let's just talk about it. If I die and I go to heaven, first of all, based on the first 20 minutes of this episode, that's probably not going to happen unless God's like, I got to meet this Devon Decker fellow. And then I'm before God and I'm like, hey, God, what's up? And he's like, thank you for getting that I'm the reason Moses wasn't a misogynistic jerk in the Bible. I heard it. I've been a subscriber to the Say Report from the beginning. I love the very special episodes. And then, God, we give each other low bones. And then, like, I got a nice room in heaven, probably.
Oh my God, there's so much. Okay, first and foremost, I know that a lot of the time we will point to the moment and say, "Hey, remember when we say we're the show that talks about everything? This is what we mean." I think this is it, Dev. I think this is the quintessential moment in which we can say that we are the show that talks about everything.
Because we are talking about my
whether or not you poop when you're a ghost.
When you're not when you're a ghost. When you're a ghost, I believe you do not poop because you are only you're a spirit, and spirits do not have any there's no physicality there.
What you mean? Does the soul poop?
No. I guess not the soul. So the soul is what goes to heaven. So if that's the case, then no, you don't. There's not like bathrooms in heaven, and thank God for that. Because
I don't know, man. I gotta be honest. Like, some of my best times on Earth are those 10 minutes that you get to yourself when you get to scroll through Reddit as you're sitting on the fucking toilet. And like, it's not even like, hey, I had to go when I went to the bathroom. It is legitimately like, hey, I'm gonna shut out the rest of the world. This is my moment to say, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Like nothing can get to me. If anybody ever called you, or if anybody ever texted you, or if anybody ever like shot you like a fucking like DM or any of that shit, and you were like, I couldn't answer right away, sorry, I was using the restroom. Like, it is an automatic pass for anything. Like, legitimately, like, dudes on death row, like fucking push off your sentence because you were like, I gotta go to the bathroom real quick, and then just don't come out for 10 years. Like anybody and everybody will give you a fucking pass when you're like, I had to go to the bathroom. Like, that's just free money right there, man. Right?
I don't disagree with you, but then the question I have is, like. That doesn't seem like paradise to me. That doesn't seem like a heavenly plane. Like, I feel like I could find another way to have 10 minutes to myself rather than sitting in the bathroom.
It's not that heaven is the bathroom, but that heaven.
I'm not saying that heaven is the bathroom. I'm saying I don't believe, first of all, real estate in heaven, right? If everything that we have been told by religions that say this is how you get to heaven has to be scarce. There has to not be a lot of room in heaven. Like, I would be surprised if you didn't tell me that Richard Donner's original script for the first Superman didn't have Lex Luthor working for God in some way. Like, God's like, I need more room for heaven. And Lex Luthor's like, I got you, G. I'm just saying. I mean, why is that the plot of every Superman movie? Is that Lex Luthor's making more world? Seriously. Like, that's Lex Luthor's go-to in Superman the first one, and Superman Returns, and kind of in Superman 2. And then Superman, The Quest for Peace, he, like, makes Nuclear Man. And Nuclear Man's also going to somehow get more space for Lex Luthor. It's his only play.
I mean, it's all that Lex Luthor ever wants. He just wants a home of his own. I mean, he's one of the most misunderstood bad guys in all of movie superhero history. In the comic books, it's a completely different Lex Luthor. Like, for real, right? Like
Oh yeah.
like the movie Lex Luthor cannot and does not ever exist in the comics. But in the movies, all he ever just wants is just a home of his own. He also like. I feel bad for John Cryer as baby Lex Luthor, but he's also trying to get his dad more space.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Quest for Peace. That's it. The only movie that doesn't revolve around making more world is Superman 3, and that movie's about making more Superman.
Yeah.
And Richard Pryor's there, and also is like the first time that salami slicing has like ever featured in a movie. And then, you know, Hackers, Office Space, The Accountant kind of mentioned it briefly. Like,
no, man, the worst one is The Wrestler. Oh, God.
I've never seen The Wrestler. I should see The Wrestler. I think it might be the only Darren Aronofsky film I haven't seen, which is crazy.
That is fucking nuts to me because I actually, as much as I like Darren Aronofsky, but as somebody that's like, I could probably only watch this movie by myself, The Wrestler is the only movie of his, because this is the dude that also did the Life Tree there one with what's his name, Ponce de Leon. The Fountain, thank you. Yes, but right? Am I wrong?
Yeah,
that
he
is
did
Darren
The Fountain.
Yeah, completely unwatchable, but I love that movie.
I agree.
But The Wrestler
I'm
is
right there with you.
Yeah, but The Wrestler though, I feel like is one of his most watchable and noteworthy films, and
it's his most mainstream
features,
film. Yeah,
well, yeah, for sure, but also heavily features salami slicing.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But yeah, it's just weird that like that's Lex Luthor. But that's the thing, like if real estate is at a premium in heaven, this is me imagining that God has like a big fuse box that controls what the people in heaven can do. I'd be switching off the bathroom switch. Like that'd be the first one.
Forgive me for not listening to you earlier because I totally was, but I might have missed this. Did you also mention that this is also the plot of Superman Returns, in which Kevin Spacey comes in and plays him, and also it's all about him trying to find like a home of his own by creating the Kryptonite island that he can live on without Superman?
Yeah, exactly. That's
like
also
always...
Superman Returns. It's all he cares about is making land. And then in like Superman Returns, he has that weird line of like, it's the only thing they're not making enough of.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but this has been your plan every movie, Lex Luthor. Even when we retcon 3 and 4 from the continuity, like you're still obsessed with it. You have made Lex Luthor a very tragic character for me, though. I need you to know that because I never considered that interpretation of the character, that he's just looking for his own fortress of solitude, as it were.
Well, and like it is legitimately, if you think about Lex Luthor as this guy, that all he wants to do, and we talk about this a lot in DC specifically, there are these human figures that are up against these gods. They find themselves in the presence of these gods. Now you have your Commissioner Gordons who find their place with amongst the gods, right? And that's like important to his character, is him trying to find his place amongst them. And then you have these guys like Lex Luthor, where their entire attitude is like, no, I shouldn't have to live amongst them. And like, in some stories that means getting rid of them. In other stories it means legitimately just trying to find some place in which they don't exist. Right? Like he is just trying to find this place as a human being in which he does not have to deal with the fucking woes of superheroes being in his world. Because let's be honest, in both Marvel and DC and many other iterations of like superhero universes, like the worst thing that ever happens to them is superheroes show up.
All right, so this is real talk, and if it hasn't happened, we should somehow figure out how to be the guys to write this. There should be a story in one of those worlds of a town that's like the Amish, who like superheroes don't come here. We don't believe in superheroes here. Because like
we don't believe or we don't allow.
Well, so it'd be more like The Village, if we're being honest, where like the person who is
talking about language,
the person who establishes this village, this haven. The name of the town is Haven. The person who establishes Haven is like really intelligent and builds like a cloaking dome around it so that like superheroes cannot see it or enter it. So it's just like a bit of it's sort of like, for lack of a better term, Genosha or the Savage Lands, where like you don't know that it's there until you're within it. But like, rather than the mutants having their like safe place where we can be mutants, or like the Savage Lands where it's the land that time forgot, it's literally a place for normal humans to not have to worry about what happens when Thanos shows up.
Yeah. I mean, like it is for all intents and purposes like MCU Wakanda, right? Like the idea that like they are just so cut off, separated, and protected from the outside world that they're able to just kind of just move on and at their own pace and in their own way, right? And like, and that idea that and it is, we are not the first people to discuss the idea that like superheroes ruin the fun for everybody, right? Like that is Batman's whole rogues gallery, is like the conversation of whether or not they would exist, whether if Batman had never become Batman, right? Like, and like that is it is a legitimate conversation to have. Like I feel like as much as it is kind of like on the one side of the fence tropey to introduce that idea, and on the other side of the defense, like the other side of the fence, it being that conversation of just like, I hate superheroes to begin with, so obviously I'd be happier if superheroes didn't exist. I feel like that's a story that everybody can get behind, right? What we're getting into is legitimately, though, is the boys' territory, right? Like,
I don't
like
know
that
anything
idea.
about that, unfortunately. But yeah,
But it is that idea that like superheroes really are just kind of the worst. Like we've held them up, and like the meta commentary of that, both that comic and that show, of we're not just talking about like in existence, we're talking about as a genre. The idea of the superheroes just kind of fucking ruined it for everybody, and like that is legitimately a conversation that has existed for a while, and we are slowly starting to have in the mainstream, and like it may eventually lead to the downfall of the superhero genre in film, much in the way as we saw like the Western kind of go and things like that. I don't know, but like I do feel like it is definitely something worth exploring further for like everybody's sake.
yeah, I don't disagree, and in fact, and I don't ever want to talk about it on this show unless like I have taken the precautions. But a lot of what you just discussed is central focuses of my own homegrown superhero character stories, the Devman saga. But that's a conversation that I'd love to have with you off mic, much like So Coventry or Devon and the Genie. Like, these are good ideas.
See? These are
that
ideas
I'd like
that
to talk to you
people don't know
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole secret Say report that are interesting, but like I'm a little nervous to share them because I don't want to lose them. Because that movie Sky High came out, and I was working on a story for Devman, and Sky High was pretty much the story beat for beat. And it made me feel like
you shouldn't have fucking gotten high with Tim Allen in that pub one night and told him everything. Because
I don't think Tim Allen has anything to do with it. Kurt Russell. My problem was getting drunk with Kurt Russell.
What's the Tim Allen one? Save
Zoom.
me here.
Zoom. It's called Zoom.
It's called Zoom.
It's called Zoom.
It's Sky High, just not Disney, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also years before Disney, but I'm talking like straight up beat for beat plot details that I had written down in a little notebook. It's because Kurt Russell came to town, and I'm like, Kurt Russell doesn't scam me. I can drink Kurt Russell under the table. I couldn't. Kurt Russell's still a badass. Drank Devon Decker under the table, and this was when Devon Decker was heavy drinking. And you know, Kurt Russell afterwards, we're sitting there at the place where we used to go. What was the name of that place? It's like the Chop House now. It was a lady's name. Is this making any sense to you, Sejohn?
I'm trying to think of the place up in fucking out by URI that was like the mill that everybody thought was the shit, and we went one night, and for me it was like I paid way too much for just somebody to put fucking bacon bits on my cheese fries. I'm trying to remember what it was.
So you're talking about the Muse Tavern? I'm feeling like it's not the Muse Tavern that I'm talking about. It's first of all, Muse Tavern, great memory there. I got a job there because I went out with some dudes, and then afterwards we got into a fight with some people in the parking lot. And of all the people, like a bunch of URI film interested people, I was the only one who participated in this parking lot brawl. And they're like, so you have a job with us whenever you want because you were there when we needed you.
I will say this: best thing about the Muse is they had the Gator Bowl, and that was the thing where it was the fish bowl full of 1,000 different alcohols that had a little plastic gator at the bottom, and like for your birthday they would just hand you one of those motherfuckers.
Yeah. I've had some fun at the Muse Tavern. I'm not gonna lie, but that's not. I'm thinking about the place that was across from the Wakefield Mall, but like slightly up a hill, where like every theater party happened.
Yeah, I remember. It was basically it was your basic like cellos or Greg's.
But it
Those are
wasn't
both
that. But
Rhode
it was
Island
like,
references.
yeah,
It wasn't one of those,
it
but it
was.
was one of those.
It
That
was
was
it
what their
was a
whole
family
thing was.
owned one. It really like kind of reminded me of like a Twin Oaks, where like because Twin Oaks is basically just a Cellos or Greg's, but not franchised to death.
Yeah, I mean every state
Every
has
place
one of
has
these.
that.
It's like it's that restaurant you go to and you order buffalo wings and they're clearly just the fucking frozen Tyson buffalo wings that they just defrosted in the back, like it's that kind of place.
Right. But that place, that's the place where I learned to drink. And of course, if Kurt Russell is down, not Russell Crowe, I would never think I could drink Russell Crowe under the table. Kurt Russell,
Oh,
he's a
fuck,
little
man.
older. I mean, Russell Crowe is 30-odd foot of grunt, right? I'm not fighting 30-odd foot of grunt. What happened to this episode?
Look, Russell Crowe is the greatest Mad Max character to never exist in Mad Max, and that's in real life.
That's very true. That's a true statement. But regardless, Kurt Russell stole my Deaf Man ideas, put him in Sky High. I'm not upset. Sky High is a very good movie, and obviously we're like how many years removed from that? 15 years removed from that, and I still haven't done anything with my ideas. So if they have to be put on the screen because Kurt Russell got me drunk at this place, I can't. It's a lady's name. Then good for Kurt Russell for seeing
We're gonna call
potential
it
and
Claudius.
stealing it.
It was Claudius.
It wasn't Claudius. I don't know. I can't look it up because it closed. It's now something else. It's now like a high-end steakhouse that I don't ever want to go to because there's just too many memories. But what I wanted to say is I do not believe that the dead defecate. However, I believe that bringing a bunch of toilet paper to hell would make sense because I have to imagine that a lot of the torture is, butt related. And toilet
Fair
paper, you'd want some toilet paper just to like dry up the blood that's coming out of your bruised anus.
And
From-
that is a sentence that was said on the Say report. Man, what did you mean to talk about today?
Oh God! Well, you know what? Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about, like happy birthday time, is I wanted to throw some shade at the Cosby Show, and not for the normal reason that Bill Cosby is kind of a jerk, but because with
Kind of
this
a jerk.
episode,
Yeah, okay.
he's a fucking rapist, and he sexually assaulted and took advantage of fans because he felt like he was untouchable, right? Not to riff on Hannibal Buress, but it's all true, and I'm glad that justice was finally found for those people that he hurt who were brave enough to come forward years later.
And those that could not find the bravery to do it, you still deserve justice.
No. That's true. Anybody who was hurt by Bill Cosby, hopefully you found some solace in the fact that he was held accountable for his crimes. But today we're talking about the fact that the Cosby Show only had 201 episodes plus one blooper special, bringing their count to 202, and the Say Report just hit 203. Suck it, Cosby. That's not consent.
Hey, man, this is a Christmas celebration I can get behind.
Yeah, right. It made me very happy. Like when I was looking up 200th episodes and I saw the Cosby Show was at 201. It's like, what a stupid number, the Cosby Show. We're gonna blow that out of the water. Also, I'd like to give like credit and kudos to Red Zone. They just celebrated their 200th episode of Red Zone yesterday.
Excellent.
And that's awesome. They've been around since 2009. So also, we did what they did in half the time. So like, thumbs up for the Say Report.
We did.
But no, I mean, the Red Zone is awesome. I don't know if you're someone who like doesn't get all the games around you or like just likes watching football. Of course, hopefully you watch your actual games. Oh, I'm going to throw some shade at Carrie Underwood too. Sorry, Carrie. If you if you have your team and you watch your team's game, but then like you just want football on as sort of white noise on a Sunday, Red Zone is the place to do it. And their touchdown montage that happens at the close of every episode, like just watch that. You get to see like the pinnacle of the sport for the week.
Yeah, no, phenomenal, just sports highlights for the week.
Yeah,
Of course.
it's very, very good. But also, I'm gonna throw some shade at Carrie Underwood because I'm throwing shade at everybody right now. It's the throwing shade 5 minutes on this episode Say Report.
Let's be honest, this is the Say Report Unleashed. After a year of not knowing how to fucking walk on the eggshells that are 2020, that's what this episode is. But go ahead.
He's not wrong. This is one of those situations where she took over for Pink. Pink did the original Sunday Night song, and then it was I don't remember who was right immediately after Pink. Before
Did Imagine Dragons have one for a bit?
I don't think so. I don't know. I didn't even know that.
The Sunday Night Football song. It might have been the Monday Night Football.
It might have been
song.
Monday Night. Monday Night has been shifting because when it was revealed that Hank Williams Jr. is just awful, they decided that All My Rowdy Friends should not be the theme song of Monday Night Football. So they shifted it to Sunday, and I believe it was Pink who did it first, but I was working on the ship, so I never got to see Sunday Night Football, so I didn't even realize, like, this is research. But now it's Carrie Underwood, and I fucking hate the song for Sunday Night Football. I mean, for starters, I don't like it because it's I Hate Myself for Loving You by Joan Jett, poorly parodied to be about Sunday Night Football. But then, to take it one step forward, it's so reductive of everything that it's singing about. I've been waiting all day for Sunday night means that you, Sunday Night Football, do not care about the 7 other games of football that were played today. The only game that you, the NFL, care about is the one that's played on Sunday night, which really just cheapens the efforts and acts of everybody who just played in those 7 games. That's 14 NFL teams that you're just like pushing your nose up at. Like, screw you. I've been waiting all day for Sunday night. It's also reductive to the fans because if you're someone who's been watching football all Sunday, none of this really mattered. This was just me waiting for the Sunday night game. I hate it. Like,
hey,
it just.
I know, no, I like the reductive criticism is something I've been dealing a lot with this week, and it's been eating away at me too. Not necessarily with Sunday Night Football, but like there's just been a lot of talk this week of people kind of hitting that point where they're just like, oh, I don't want to think like deeply about any of this shit. I just want to enjoy what's in front of me now. And that is like that is what you're talking about, like, you know, in a fucking nutshell. Is basically that entire song is just like, fuck everything else that's happened in your life or in football or anything this week. Like, it's Sunday Night Football. It's like, okay, I watch football as an escape, but that does not mean that I want everything else in my life to eat shit. Like, that's not.
Especially, I don't want everything else in my life to eat shit and also have to listen to Chris Collinsworth for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. So I think I've thrown all the shade, and I'm going to throw a little bit more shade afterwards. But I had this beautiful transition point that I lost when I was trying to think of the place that I learned how to drink in Wakefield, Rhode Island. And that's Miles Morales, Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PS5. I finally finished it, and I platinumed it, and I'd like to talk about it. Because this is a game that had a lot of people saying things about it. Made a lot of headlines, Spider-Man Miles Morales, when it was announced.
Well, there was concern. Like let's call it what it was. It wasn't legitimate criticism, and even at the time, I think anybody legitimately putting this stuff out there wasn't saying this was criticism of the game proper, but that Sony and the way that they were handling things was worrisome.
And the thing that I'm here to report, spoilers, obviously, if you want to play Spider-Man Miles Morales, because it is available on PS4 as well. That's another thing that I feel like they haven't done the best in, like, relating to people. They kind of made it seem like it's PS5 only, but you can definitely play it on PS4. Mm-hmm. Is that all of those fears were founded, and I wish that wasn't the exact sentence I just said on the Say Report tonight. But yeah, it's not a sequel, and I'd struggle to call it a full game. It's definitely a fully realized experience, but it is akin to the expansion packs that you and I grew up with in PC gaming.
Yeah, now, so Devon's played it. got to the end of it. He's going to talk about it. I'm happy to talk about it with him. Clearly, I have not. I want to put that out before we get into it because, like, I want to make sure that that is something that is said. No matter how much shit I catch about talking about things that I don't experience myself, I am always the first to own it, and I'm going to do that here. But from what I understand, it's a little bit more than what you would call DLC, but a little bit less than what you would call a full-fledged game.
And I, at the time, was okay with that, and I still kind of am okay with it, but it feels closer to DLC than a full-fledged game.
Okay,
Like,
so
if there's a scale there.
Yeah, and so I think the best way to really talk about that is in terms of the content itself compared to the original game, right? Like what would you have wanted out of a sequel of Spider-Man that was clearly not present or clearly not intended with Miles Morales? Like what are we talking about here? If you say it's more DLC, like what are we? Like, is it basically the same mission structure? Do you feel like you're basically playing Peter Parker the whole time? Like what's going on?
So the only thing, I mean, yeah, there's a big, I don't even know where to start with this. Let's start with the fact that Miles' animations while swinging, he is different. He clearly has not been web swinging since he was 15 years old. He doesn't have, I'm trying to do the math in my head real quick, 8 years experience as Spider-Man, the way that Peter Parker did in the first Spider-Man game. So,
right.
He's not as good as it. Like, he flails a little bit. And those are all good things that communicate that you are Miles Morales. But where I started to feel more like this was an expansion pack rather than a full game, right? Or like a full experience is, for starters, and people didn't like this, and I know that this was a criticism of the first Spider-Man game. The first Spider-Man game had 6 different types of currency that was required to purchase upgrades within the game. Yeah. And that currency was tied to different mission types.
It's the Destiny problem.
Yeah.
But yeah. Where like you have to keep track of all of these different economics that are going on in the game just so that you can get your character to where you want them to be.
Right.
Yeah.
But like you do a science mission, you get a science token. You fight the Taskmaster, or you do a Taskmaster challenge, you get a Taskmaster token. And different combinations of each of these tokens is required to purchase like better web shooters or something like that. Miles Morales streamlined that into activity tokens and tech tokens. Basically, anything you do that is not related to the main story mission gets you an activity token. And then there are 35 boxes hidden in the city that hold the tech tokens. And that right there just already felt like less to me. Like it just felt like the perception of less.
Yeah, I mean, so like this is in response to like the idea of different currencies is a response to stuff like I'm thinking, just to give an example, like Shadow of Mordor, right? Or was that the name of the first one? I forget.
Yeah, Shadows of Mordor.
Yeah. And so just as an example, that's one where you had 2 different basic trees going on. You had your basic like fighter tree, which represented the human side of him, what's going on, but then you also had the wraith tree, which was everything that's going on with him, like with the spirit that's inhabited him, right? And the thing is like you kind of could use your experience towards either, and for a lot of people that becomes not so immersive, because the idea that like I'm going around stabbing a bunch of dudes and I can apply that to the ghost that's possessed me doesn't really line up, right? So like narratively there's like a disconnect. So in response to that, you end up in these experiences where like you have these things where in Spider-Man, if you do something sciencey, you get a science token. If you do something fightery, you get a fighter token. You do something that has to do with it, and Destiny takes it to this shitty ass extreme where it's like, oh, if you do something for this faction, you get this. If you do something for this faction, you get that. And so you end up with like 15, I think, different types of currency, and that may actually be a lowball compared to what actually was going on in Destiny 2 before the rehaul, which is something we will have to talk about someday, by the way. But before they completely revamp that, like, it was a nightmare trying to figure out like, oh, I really want this one piece of armor. What do I need for that? Oh, I need to go out there and I need to find these elements. I need to get this type of currency. I need to get these specific weapons beforehand and break them down. Like it was just impossible to like figure this shit out. And so I I understand the desire when you get the criticism of there's way too much going on in the economics of this game to try and streamline that, but like you need to balance that against like the idea of what fans want to do, because as much as like somebody says like, man, it really is a bummer to keep track of these 6 different types of currency, it doesn't mean that I mentally don't want to think about these 6 different realms in this game. It just means that like it needs to be frontlined better. Like the UI needs to present this idea better to me that like I did this thing, it rewarded me this. That makes sense, right? Like the line from A to B is very clear to me, is really what I'm saying. So it doesn't mean that I want to lose those 6 currencies. What it means is like I don't want you to front end me having to figure this shit out so much. Like I still want those to exist, but like babysit me a little bit more through that process. Don't eliminate it.
Right. And I believe that when we do get a proper Spider-Man sequel to that game that came out in 2018, that we probably will still see that 6 currency system. I mean, again, that's conjecture at this point, but it did really feel like there was a moment where I needed 6 more activity tokens in order to max out all of my items. And I just did random crimes on the street. I did 6 of them in order to get those, where when the same thing happened in Spider-Man, it's like, okay, I need 2 base tokens. I need a science token. So like it required me to do different things that made me feel like Spider-Man, and it really did enhance the immersion of the situation.
Yeah, I think that one that really handles it well, like recently, is Borderlands 3, honestly, because what they did is they separated the character support tree from the Guardian token support tree, which what happens with the Guardian tokens is it basically becomes like your new game plus, where like you carry that to all of your characters, and the definitive line is really obvious. It is, here's the things that are important to your character narratively and otherwise, like to use a term that nobody's going to care about is ludogenically, like narratively versus that, right? Like it's the idea of like, well, it's the idea of like,
no,
what,
I get
like,
it. I just can't
yeah,
believe
yeah.
this is that episode where we said a bunch of things I never thought we were going to say,
Yeah.
despite being the Say report.
But it is the idea of like narratively this has happened, and so you gain the power to do this because at this point in the story you've learned how to do it. Whereas like ludogenically, what that means is just as somebody that exists in this world, because you're doing this so much, you shoot a gun enough, you learn how to shoot it better, right? So that's the difference, right? Is the difference between the story giving it to you and you just naturally learning this, right? And that's its own tree. That is your character tree. When you load in a Borderlands character at level 63, this is what they know how to do. Versus the Guardian tokens, which is like, we understand this is a video game, and like you as a player has done this thing enough that you earned the right to be able to now do this anytime you start this game up. So you could load up a level 5 character, or you could load up a level 65 character, and you still get this bonus because you've been playing enough that you've earned that, right? And so it is this beautiful kind of like give and take of you're gonna do more of this as this particular character, but that's okay because that experience is going to carry over to this other character that maybe you don't throw grenades as much with this character because you don't have to, but that's okay. They still get a grenade bump because you as a player have thrown enough grenades in the world to know like you deserve this extra shit. Whereas like this character, that they get a little bit of a buff to their grenades versus this other character because you throw more of them as, right? It's this weird give and take that Borderlands 3 really balances well with those 2 attitudes, right? And it's really nice as somebody that loves to go into Borderlands and every now and then just pop on a new character because they introduce a bunch of new shit to them and I really want to see it. I don't play much as the assassin Zane, but like I really want to check that out. Well, I get a bunch of these benefits because I've been playing so much. Like that feels good, right? And that feels really natural and that feels really fair. Whereas like what you're describing is like there's no matter how you do this, no matter what you do narratively or not, like it doesn't matter. Here's just a bunch of XP points that you could just apply to whatever the fuck you want. And like that doesn't feel earned. That just feels kind of like a cop out.
Yeah, that's exactly. Thank you. You really streamlined that the way that Insomniac streamlined Spider-Man Miles Morales. But the moment that really where I said I have thoughts and I'm going to need to talk about them on the Say report is they've replaced, in the first game, the Taskmaster was there, and he was like observing Spider-Man, because that's what Taskmaster does. He observes superheroes so that he can, because he has, I'm trying to think of it. Basically, he has photographic instincts. He has like photographic, there's a stupid term that they give for it. But if he sees someone do it, he can do it.
Right.
So if you're a guy like the Taskmaster who has that ability, you're just going to watch people do stuff all the time and be like, I'm learning all this. I'm learning everything. I can be Spider-Man now. And they've replaced that with 9 trainings that were designed by Peter Parker and left as holographic training simulators for Miles to do, because Peter is away in Europe during the game, which is why Miles is the person who's like responsible for the city. And that's fine.
Yeah, it also feels like anybody that's ever played a Arkham game knows that those are just straight up just the AR trainings. Like that is straight out of that.
There's a thing where you have to do a traversal challenge where you have to swing through loops and circles in the sky. And I'm like, remember when Superman 64 did this and everybody hated it? And now like people are probably going to be okay with it in this Spider-Man game because you're a Spider-Man.
Yep.
Like it's one of those weird things where like you think about it. So once you complete those 9 that are given for you, and I will give credit there, completing each combat challenge unlocks a skill as well. So that sort of acts as a differential in terms of your upgrading of the character. It fills sort of some of that gap, right? Like in a way, combat challenges become a third type of currency. It's just about completing them, but you also get activity tokens for completing them. So it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
Yeah.
But once you've completed all 9 of the initial combat challenges, a 10th combat challenge appears in which Peter Parker has recreated his fight against the Vulture. And it's literally just the Vulture fight from the first Spider-Man game as Miles Morales.
I mean, do you get to do it differently because of the different powers you have? Like, do you feel like you approached it differently as Miles than you did as Peter?
No.
Ugh.
I did the same thing that I did. And then, like, it does that thing where, like, it feels like lazy video games to me, where halfway through the fight, Peter's like, and then what happened? A clone of the Vulture showed up, and then you're fighting 2 Vultures, and then even then, it's just the same fight that you were doing before, but now it's against 2 Vultures. And, you know, I hadn't really thought about how much was being reused until, like, the first fight of the game is against Rhino, and it's very reminiscent of the Rhino fight in the first game, except for the fact that now you have the Venom powers. So instead of having to literally matador him into walls to stun him and damage him, you get to punch him with Miles' electric powers.
Right.
And make that happen. But like that doesn't feel different enough. And in fact, later on in the game, he gets an upgrade from the bad guy so that he is immune to your Venom powers, and you literally need to matador him into tanks in order to knock him down to the point where you can damage him.
Yeah, so they actually make it the same fight.
Yeah.
They go out of their way to make it
the same thing, except they added ads. That's hard to say that they added ads. But there are dudes around that you have to fight, where in the Spider-Man game, you just fought the Rhino alone. So it's like, okay, interesting, but still very similar to the first game. You fight the Prowler, obviously, because it's a Miles Morales game, and that fight is very reminiscent of the Taskmaster fight in the first game. Like, it just feels like there weren't enough new experiences. Like, one of the dumbest things in Spider-Man for the PS4 original Spider-Man game is you have to catch pigeons, because there's a guy, Howard, who has a pigeon coop and his pigeons get out, and Spider-Man is friends with him, so he wrangles the pigeons for Howard. And like, you do that as Miles, and it's like, Miles doesn't have any connection to Howard.
That's weird. So with that particular actual detail in mind, as weird as that is, that's actually super important to the question I'm about to ask you. the main criticism that was levied against it before it came out, and I will say that most of the criticisms that I read were saying, look, we haven't played it yet, but this feels like it was meant to be add-on DLC for the first game, that they kind of took advantage of the world state, and I mean IRL world state, to kind of push a quote unquote new game, which is then not going to get its due because it was only ever being built as DLC. Does it feel like that?
It's hard to say yes to that, is how I'm going to answer that question.
Well, okay.
Because,
so what makes it hard to say yes to that then?
So
right?
I did the 3 DLCs that were released for that Spider-Man game last year, The City Under Siege. There were 3 separate DLCs, but like they felt very similar to this. Like the mission structure was very similar to the extra mission structures that you do as Miles in this game. So it's kind of hard to look at it and say, well, this is just the DLC but with a different character. But I will give them credit that the story is far deeper and more engaging than City Under Siege's was.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like what they did do, and where I will give them credit, is that they beefed up the storyline to make it feel substantial. And I understand that, like, City Under Siege, because it's separated into 3 different chunks, if they were all mashed together, they would probably feel similar to what you get from Miles Morales. Yeah,
okay.
I'm okay saying that.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, like this was a criticism put out before the game ever came out, and I'll be honest, since Miles Morales came out, I've heard a lot of really positive things from people saying like they're really enjoying it, and it does feel more substantial than the individual DLCs that came out before. But it says something that it, like, yeah, the individual DLCs, it feels different, but if you were to put all the DLCs together, then it really just feels like it's just another one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was getting some flack for being something that was just kind of Sony taking advantage of a cultural moment to really kind of beef up one of their products and make a little bit more money on it, rather than actually making, like, taking the time to make a true Miles Morales experience. And you know, it sounds like they did more than they could have, but maybe not as much as they should have. Like, does that sound fair?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is not a 50-50 split on should would. What they did do, it's close to like 65-35. Like, there's a lot that they did good. It's just the reusage of things. Like, obviously, it's still going to be New York, right? Because that's where Spider-Man takes place.
Well,
so for them to not reuse that map would be foolish.
Well, right, and on top of that, like we are talking about a video game put out what, like 2 years after its original predecessor. Like they were also on a bit of a time crunch. So I mean, is it the same conversation that people have with like Resident Evil 3 versus Resident Evil 2? Maybe like I would never call Resident Evil 3 DLC to Resident Evil 2, but they definitely do reuse a bunch and all that shit because they were on a bit of a crunch to like get this game out.
They really don't, though. That like.
Well,
now that you bring up Resident Evil 2, 3...
Not the new ones, like, but...
No,
but
the original ones, yes.
The original ones,
yeah, the original ones very much use the same locations. And actually, one of the things that impressed me, though, about Resident Evil 3 that was also released this year was when you get to the part of the game that is Resident Evil 2, it's like 4 streets. It's not even 4 streets. It's like 1 street from that game that is used.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it's cool because it makes it feel like both of these things are happening in Raccoon City, but it doesn't feel like reused assets.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that says something about like something like Miles Morales, where like, yeah, it's fair because they are taking both place in New York and all that sort of stuff. But like the idea that there is not enough of a moment to say, oh, this feels like its own thing is, you know, because like I think of the hard swing in the other direction of that is not to keep comparing it to Batman, but like the Batman games that all take place in Arkham City, right? And the idea of Arkham Knight, and one of the big issues that I personally have with the map in Arkham Knight, and a lot of people did, is that like you can see these things that were in Arkham City, but it doesn't feel like it's the same city. It feels like a different map. And there was enough time in between where like that was okay enough with me that like it doesn't ruin the game for me. But like I can't take, whereas Arkham Origins, which was released very quickly after Arkham City, you could lay the same map over each other and you could point out like beat for beat where things were. That is not the case with Arkham Knight, but there's enough that goes on where you're like, oh yeah, this feels kind of the same, because like I remember this landmark, I remember this area from the other ones, so like it works, but it doesn't in a lot of ways. But again, there was enough time between the two of them that it was okay with me. Whereas again, these games are coming out within 2 years of each other.
Right. And in the gap between, you had a 3-part DLC that like was 2019. So if you were playing them in that, like there's no gap between them. And the graphical changes, where City Under Siege mostly takes place at night, so you get really good like lighting effects in those games. This one takes place in the winter, so like you have that cool snow effect, very similar to like Uncharted 2. I was reminded of like, oh, it's cool seeing snow and seeing snow land on the character and how it interacts. And that's cool as like graphical flexing, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm reminded too much of the first game. And what really boiled it down is I did a speed run of Spider-Man after I completed Spider-Man 2 years ago. I said, I want to see what happens if I just play the main story content, how long that takes me to complete. And that took me 8 hours to do. And I just sat down 8 hours, finished the game. I did that same thing with Miles Morales on Saturday, and I did it in 3.5 hours. So, like, even just based on content that way, it, like, that's less substantial. And
yeah, I mean, it's crazy to do it in the way that I'm about to, but like if you think about it in terms of monetary value to time, which is something that is very reminiscent of like the 2000s era a gamer in me, but to say that like it's a game that you didn't spend $60 on, but you did spend 40, so I would expect for every 10 hours you put into the main game, you probably put about 6 into this. So maybe it kind of, I don't know.
It kind of works out. Yeah, you're not wrong. If we're talking about the economics of time, I don't look at it that way. I don't care. Like if I can play a game 100 times, I mean, look, I'm someone who's beaten Link to the Past at least 1,000 times. And like even like this year, like Curse of the Moon 2, I beat minimum 6 times, and I know that the number is more than that. And those are games that I spent less on both of those, right?
No,
to
but I
talk
think,
on it, but
yeah, but I think where the economics work out is more in terms of on the other end of that, of what am I paying the developer for the amount of time that they're putting in to put this game in front of me, right? Is like if I spend $60 and expect the developer to put a 100-hour game in front of me, then if I spend $40, they can be forgiven, and that's a shit way of phrasing it, but there, I did it. Like they can be forgiven for putting in a 60-hour game in front of me instead of a 100-hour game, right? So like if you were willing to put a $60 price tag on 10 hours of your life for Spider-Man, putting $40 down on 5 hours, like, you know, like does that mean anything to you? And that's something that every different person is going to have to work out, because everybody's in a different economic situation. Like part of the reason that I have not dove into either of these games is like I want to give these games like the credit and where they're due. So my intention is legitimately, when I get a PS5, is to buy the pack of the two of them, which I think they all come that way now, right? Miles Morales just comes with Spider-Man.
It's $30 more. That's a $70 price tag as opposed to $40 for just Miles Morales.
But there it is like the idea that I'm willing to spend that to get both of those games on the PS5 in the quality that they are, and spend the time that I want to put on them, you know?
Yeah. And like, you get the DLC in that. That includes the DLC. So you're the complete package for $70 is a good value. And I don't, and even just on its own for $40, Miles Morales is a good game that evoked a lot of emotion from me, and I found enjoyable. I had those moments where I was like, I know Spider-Man, so what's going to be a big reveal is ruined for me. Like, but that happens a lot of times with comic book stuff. Not sure why I brought it up. I guess it's just something that's floating around in my head. But like, I don't want to say don't play it. It's just I also wouldn't even be considering this if that discussion hadn't happened.
Yeah.
And that fight against Vulture, like the one fight against Rhino, when it was just the one fight against Rhino, I'm like, I'm fine with that. It's a good connecting to the world. It brings me in. But then the Vulture fight happens. I'm like, this is gratuitous. Like, you just kind of shoved this in. Like, to add content for me? I don't know. Like, it wasn't fun. Like, the combat challenges were new and different and actually a challenge for me. Where, like, beat this guy up that you already beat up? Oh, okay.
Yeah, man. I mean, reused assets are never fun, and then on top of that, to have the added conversation on top of that is an uncomfortable but clearly necessary one of like, you had the opportunity here with a very predominant African American protagonist in like the world of comics and film to bring that to the video game realm, and did they succeed? I mean, like I said,
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people that are very excited with it. And are you saying yes?
I will say yes. They succeed. There's a whole story about him being Harlem's Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And the only unfortunate thing about that story, and this is a recommendation, I haven't really given huge plot points in this. Like I've talked, a lot of my complaints are related to side quests.
Yeah.
But if you're going to play this game, throughout the game, you have side quests that take place in Harlem. Those are the only things that should be completed in order to fully understand the story. To the point that if they had been part of the actual story, I don't think I'd be having this same complaint conversation with you. Like the fact that I had going out of my way to meet people in Harlem and be Harlem's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is important for the development of Miles Morales as a hero. And it's weird that it's relegated to side optional content, especially when the ending, whether you've done that or not, still features those people front and center.
All right. No,
So,
man.
yes,
that's good to hear. That's, and I think that's where the question was. Like with everything that happened this summer with this game and everything that has been kind of building up to the release of it, and I think that probably answers why there has not been so much of that same conversation after its release. And take that for what it is, whether there should have been or not. I have not heard much in the conversation about it afterwards. Now, granted, it's also coming out in the time we're in the middle of a bunch of other representation conversations with the bullshit going down with like cyberpunk and stuff like that too. So like it's kind of it may be just getting lost in the noise. But like I have heard good things about it since its release, and it sounds like you've got some good feelings about it no matter what, and like that's good. Like that's good to hear. I'm excited.
Good. So I know we're dangerously close to supersized episode of the Say Report currently, but I feel like something happened over the weekend that we need to discuss.
Oh.
And I feel like that makes me think that maybe you're not aware of it, but it's something that we've sort of alluded to and hinted at on this show a lot. And then, Warner went ahead and just pulled the pin and tossed that grenade.
I figured we were going to have to talk about this, but yeah, let's do it. We have to talk about this.
Yeah. So, first of all, in case you didn't know, Wonder Woman 84 will be released simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max on December 25th, 2020. What you may not have known, and you probably did because it's been everywhere that I've looked, is that Warner Brothers has decided that their entire 17-film slate for the year 2021 will also be simultaneously releasing in theater and on HBO Max.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull up a list of what those movies are, because it says more when you actually look at what movies they're actually talking about in that. So that list also includes, so in addition to Wonder Woman, which I think the very overwhelming positive response to their deciding to put it on HBO at the same time, because I have heard nothing but excitement from people that are like, oh my God, yes, like I was kind of thinking I might not get to see this movie until it came out on DVD because of everything that's going on, but the fact that I get to go like actually watch it is like cool. Like that release schedule for all of 2021 includes the new Suicide Squad, Matrix 4. I believe In the Heights is in that list. Let me like
In the Heights
it's
is in
like
that list.
yeah, I
So
mean,
is
Tom and
Dune.
Jerry, yeah, Dune, like all jokes aside about Tom and Jerry, I think it's actually kind of important that it's going to be one of the ones included in this release style. Yeah, but Dune, like the fucking like crazy ass possible trilogy that will be. The new Conjuring is in that list, like which actually is for anybody paying attention to the horror release schedule. The fact that that's going to actually be coming straight to HBO Max is key. The new Space Jam is in that, whatever that turns out being.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
some substantial films. It's not like little stuff. It's not some movie just came out. It's not Christmas Chronicles 2. No offense to Christmas Chronicles 2 or something like Happiest Season. Like those are the type of low budget stuff that might have been, straight to DVD anyway. Like that, like again, not to cast any aspersions on those films, but they're the type of stuff that like they lived in that park, that area of cinema, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm with you.
Where these are like the big name movies, like Matrix 4 being on there is crazy.
And the fact that, like, I mean, it's clearly going to be a film made for the cinema experience, and I think that's where maybe this list kind of really struck me, is like movies like Matrix 4, even Wonder Woman, even though we knew that one was coming, like these are movies made to be seen in the cinema experience. Like when the creators of these films are making these movies, like they are shooting for a cinema audience, right? Like as much as you and I talk about the idea of like seeing something at home versus cinema, like you can't ignore what the intent was behind making these things. And so I'm very excited about these movies coming home. I will also be the first person where if they say it's okay to go back and see these movies in theaters, a lot of these movies that they announced, I really want to see in a theater. Like it's not that I want to be watching these movies at home. My excitement for Wonder Woman at home does not stem from the fact that like I'm happy I don't have to go to a theater for it. I'm happy that I don't have to consider risk in seeing a fucking movie. Nobody should have to consider that, right? Like that's ridiculous. It's the same shit that I felt about after all of the issues with Dark Knight and the shootings at cinemas and the danger that people felt in going to see a movie. It's like that's not fair. That's not fair to anybody involved in creating that movie. That's not fair to anybody that's a fan of going to the movies. Like you should not have to consider personal risk when going to see a film in theater. So bravo on them deciding like we're going to remove that factor and allowing you to see something like Wonder Woman and stuff like that, right? And that's great. But at the end of the day, I still want to go. I still want to buy my popcorn and go sit in a dark theater with 60 other people and enjoy this experience together. Like I like that part of going to the movies, and I can't wait till the day we get back to that. And so like I might venture out in 2021, depending on how things are going, in the coming months. But until then, it's kind of nice to know that doesn't have to be part of the equation for me.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing for me. This is not the future of cinema in any way. Like it can't be. This is clearly a reaction to the fact that we had a second surge. We're currently living through the second wave of COVID infection. And Warner Brothers was like, we need to make a game plan for 2021. Here's what our game plan is. And honestly, for some of these movies, if everything is clean and it is a simultaneous release to theater and on HBO Max, I will go see it in the theater.
Yeah.
I'd go see it in the theater so that my first viewing is in the theater having that experience. But then because it's on HBO Max, I can watch it with my father. and have the conversation that I would have with him 6 months down the line when he finally got to see it at home. Because my father doesn't go out, right? He has an immune issue. His immune system is not all there. So he's not really going to movie theaters even before everything that happened.
Yeah,
because
and
it was a
especially not
risk for
after.
him. Yeah.
Even if they come out tomorrow
Yeah.
and they say, hey, we've got a vaccine for everybody, it'll be out by Christmas, you can go to the movies in January, like that. Yeah, I still would be hesitant to run out the door myself, never mind somebody with immune compromised system.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So like, but to be able to get to watch that movie with him like the following Saturday, if I go to a Thursday release of a film, and then get to have that conversation when it's relevant within the zeitgeist and have him understand references, like that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But like, like it's not that, because the fact of the matter is, if we get to the point where movie theaters are no more, and I don't think that'll ever happen. I think that there'll always be a cinema where you can go and see movies, but it'll become a niche thing for like enthusiasts, and tickets will be $50. You were complaining about $15. If like you going to the movies is for super fans, the price will go up so that they can cover themselves.
The
yeah. Like, and yeah, like that's just a fact of it. But if we just are having movies sent to home, films are not going to be made the way that these 17 films have been made. Because we saw that with straight-to-TV movies. We saw that, like, the budgets were less because you were just watching it at home.
Yeah.
And it's nothing against watching it at home. It's just the fact that because it's being beamed directly to people and available in that way, the potential for profit is just so much less. So you're not going to invest the millions of dollars that you put into a Marvel movie if that movie's just coming home.
I think the thing to look at, if you feel that way though, is look at the quality of something like an HBO or a Showtime experience. And like I think that you'll see there that like you still get quality films, or look at like good high-end Netflix. Now look, I know Netflix will put out some trash if they can afford to put out some trash. If they think they can get away with it, they won't spend the money on it. But like we still got things like The Irishman last year. You know what I mean? Like
and
Netflix
Trial
will
of Chicago 7 this year.
Right, and like they'll put money behind a thing if they feel like it will merit it. You're still going to see money behind projects, and it'll be something that people will have access to. But you're not wrong about the cinema experience. Like they're gonna charge an arm and a leg because they know they'll be able to. They're gonna figure out ways to make it niche. You're not gonna see nearly as many movie theaters, I think, in the future. I mean, the ones that haven't already closed, you're gonna see more of them close over time, unless they can kind of promise something that other theaters can't. That's just gonna be part of the economics of it for the next few years, for sure. There are two movies in this list that I think are actually really kind of telling, though, about like the far-flung future of this, and that is James Wan's *Malignant*. Again, anybody paying attention to horror over the last few years knows who James Wan is, or Fast and the Furious. But he's the guy behind a lot of like the Conjuring films and things like that. This is a movie that has not even been, like, as far as I can tell, even written yet. like there's not even like a synopsis out, right? So the idea that like that's included on this list for Warner Brothers to say like this will be out by the end of next year and we're going to put it on HBO Max too, is this is going into the math of movies that haven't even been made yet, right? And the other one that I think is really key is the new Clint Eastwood film, Cry Macho, is on this list. And the thing that's important about that is Cry Macho is, for anybody that's listened to Clint Eastwood about his filmmaking over the last 3 decades, like this is one of those stories that he has always wanted to tell. You know, back in the day, I'm sure he wanted to like be like the main star in it. And as far as I can tell, he'll probably still be in it, but he's not going to be like the young upstart in it. He'll probably be the old, teacher in it. But this is a Clint Eastwood right-wing ass like red-blooded American film, and I mean that with no negative connotation. It's just that's the audience that, like, when Clint Eastwood makes a film, that's who he's aiming for, right? And the idea that he is also on this list is key. This isn't just something where like art films are going to be the thing that like we will save cinema. Like this is This is all movies are going to deal with this, right? So like looking at both of those two films and knowing that they're also included in this, it's not just Wonder Woman, it's not just The Matrix, it's also like your kind of your right-leaning films, it's also like your unexpected films that may or may not go anywhere. Like this is the future of cinema writ large to me. Like that's what that says.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, nothing is viewed as sacred anymore. I'm sure Christopher Nolan views his films as sacred, but like I'm talking in the eyes of Hollywood.
Yeah, but considering how fucking flat Tenet felt for a lot of people, like you best expect his next film will probably be one of these like mixed releases.
Right. I mean, and that's going to be it. I don't know. It's just so strange. Like, it was something I knew we were going to have to think about. But also, you bring up that Netflix is willing to put their money into some projects. I think that, unfortunately, the Netflix model is what we need to look at right now as the proof of concept going forward beyond 2021. I mean, it would be great if there's a vaccine and we're not living in fear the same way that we have been throughout most of 2020, and people are okay going to the theater the way that they were, and the theater industry is saved, right? It doesn't become this niche industry that it already kind of was, but like even more niche, right?
Yeah.
Like there are still blockbusters where people can go for $15 and have a good time with everybody. And it'll be like multiple showings throughout the day at these multiplexes, as opposed to like one showing of the film at 4 and one showing at 7, because they just can't afford, because they're not going to cover the overhead with the amount of people. Looking at something like Netflix, you have those 2-3 movies that are treated like cinematic fare, and then you have everything else. And I feel like that's what the big studios are also going to do.
I think the scary case for this is, God love him, but Ryan Reynolds' Six Underground, I believe is the name of it, in which notoriously, God, I'd be surprised if they didn't put a cat style post edit version up by now, but like notoriously there were still scenes in that film where you could see the blue screen in the background, like completely unfinished, but just put up because at that point Netflix was just done spending money on finishing it, and like still got a lot of press, still got a lot of coverage because it was a Ryan Reynolds action movie that wasn't Deadpool in a year in which Deadpool 2 came out. Like it still got its due, and Netflix learned a real bad lesson from that like, hey, we don't have to like push to like get these things to 5-star quality to make money on this. And I'm sure like you people could point to stuff before that and sense that is definitive of that as well. But like, you know, on the other hand, like the next year we had something like The Irishman. So like it's going to be one of those things where people have to first of all stop thinking about Netflix as a monolith at this point. Like it is not the end. Like what happens on one show cannot be expected to happen on another, or what happens on one movie cannot be expected to happen on another. That's just ridiculous. At this point, Netflix has to be considered like 3 or 4 different little mini production companies under one umbrella. And the other side of that is that like these companies are going to do what Netflix has been doing and surviving on. And they're going to look at things like Hulu and Amazon too and see what they've been doing and see what they can get away with there. Because like Amazon has a lot of money in buying shit nobody else is and putting that up. Like look at their TV and movie selections. It's a lot of stuff that you just can't find anywhere else, but it's also a lot of stuff that not a lot of people want to watch. And I think you're going to find that like that is actually a market worth getting into for places like Warner Brothers and HBO, like NBC, like and Peacock, and like them putting up stuff that you kind of can't get anywhere else because they're the rights holders or they're the only ones willing to spend the money on it. And that might actually be the saving grace for a few of these places.
I would love if Peacock put up like any of the 1-season NBC shows. I mean, like I know that's redundant because Peacock is NBC, but like I would love to watch Outsourced again. I'd love to watch Powerless again. 100 Questions that had 6 episodes that were really good and just were dumped out over a summer. What?
Sorry, what's the really weird half-season show that Alan Tudyk was on that was the DC show that wasn't
Powerless?
That is Powerless?
Yep.
That is the one that is like the we're cleaning up after Batman show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like NBC has all these shows that they had, and I expected them to be up on Peacock so that
I'm I'm surprised Powerless isn't up on fucking HBO at this point with
Dude,
all the other shit that
yeah,
they grabbed.
I'm like, especially since Warner was heavily involved in that because they licensed out a lot of their characters to be used as terms. Like, but like also like Peacock, a bunch of shows left Hulu, and I just assumed that they'd be going to Peacock, like Perfect Harmony and Sunnyside, and they're just gone.
Yeah.
And that disappoints the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Because like, what am I paying for Peacock for? I know it's Yellowstone and it's Saved by the Bell reboot. I know why I'm paying for Peacock, but like, really, it's just disappointing.
Yeah, but you finished Saved by the Bell, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're a guy that will rewatch some things, but not everybody is you. I have to imagine that there are other people that have finished Saved by the Bell and they're done with it now,
And they have Peacock
right?
still for another month.
They-
Yet these
like, what do they
shows
do with
that,
it?
yeah, like, I mean, something like Outsourced, as weird as that show was at the time, the people who were on that show have gone forth and done many, many things.
Happy Endings, is that one available anywhere?
Happy
Like,
Endings
that's
is
a
on
show-
Hulu and IMDb TV, which I don't want to talk about IMDb TV. It upsets me. You know what? IMDb TV, hi, Devon Decker here, using my podcast as a platform the way that it's intended. Give me an option for no commercials, and I would be all about IMDb
I'm already
TV.
paying for Amazon Prime. Why isn't IMDb TV commercial free?
Even if you make it a prescription, a subscription like the HBO channel or the Showtime channel, I would be okay paying something to get access to IMDb TV. Like,
the thing that really gets in my craw though about them is the nerve that they have to then show up on the Amazon Prime listings as like free to you, but they're only free to you with commercials and like fuck you, don't include yourself in my Amazon searches if you're gonna be a separate entity unto yourself.
yeah. I know that IMDb is owned by Amazon, but honestly, if I could just pay that little bit, and what really bothers me is that I've been like halfway through a show on Amazon Prime, and then I'll get to episode 6, and then the whole series has shifted over to IMDb TV. And it's just like, okay. And honestly, I know what the whole thing is. A lot of the shows that are available on IMDb TV, because they have the rights, they then sell to you virtually, digitally on Amazon. And it's like $10 for the season. So like, there's a way for me to do it, but honestly, I'd rather give them $15 for the month and have access to everything. Do you know how many streaming services I'm currently subscribed to that I use on a regular basis? No, I'm asking because I don't know.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm bleeding money on this. Like, that's...
it's a fucked up model, and we've talked about in the past is the idea that streaming services have basically just become cable packages and all that nonsense and all that, and like we need to figure out what the hell we're all doing as a society when it comes to this kind of consumption. But like the news that we got this past weekend, just to bring it back to that,
Yeah.
just like it doesn't bode well in terms of clearing anything up in the future, but it does mean that it's going to force a lot of more important people into the conversation. Like the guys behind Warner Brothers, it is in their best interest to figure out what the fuck to do about streaming services now going forward. And we saw that a little bit with the kind of news with Disney possibly deciding to just make Disney Plus and Hulu just one thing. Right? It's because now that Disney has gotten like the big wigs at Disney who make the movies that are supposed to make billions of dollars every year, now that they're in the conversation, they're like, oh, this is kind of a fucking mess. We should figure this out, huh? You know, like they were very happy to let it be a mess before when it wasn't their problem. But now that they're like, oh shit, our stuff's going to be on this. Like we have to release Black Widow on this app. We have to get this fucking figured out. Like that's going to make the conversation a little bit more in our favor as consumers, I think.
And I wouldn't be surprised if next episode of the Say Report, we're talking about that because Disney is planning a big announcement this coming Thursday. So let's stop it here. We've talked a lot about streaming, and there's more stuff I want to talk about, but I think I've hit our limit right now, especially since it's also probably going to be a part of next week's episode. But it would feel weird if on this show we didn't at least touch on that fact.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean it was huge news, and
yeah,
it's something we have been predicting and talking about for all year.
Yeah. And there it is, you know? So bet on the Say Report. I don't know what I'm doing with that. Last thing that I want to say before I see if you have anything is if you are following our Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe podcast, this Friday, there's an episode that's going to be releasing in which we have looked into Billy Madison and how it fits into and establishes a cinematic universe of Adam Sandler's work. So if you're looking forward to that, that can be found by searching really anywhere where podcasts are available for Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. And we look forward to, if you like this, which is unfocused and going from everywhere to Unsolved Utah Mysteries to Pooping in Heaven, you'll probably like that one that is far more focused, like laser focused.
Yeah,
as
and
opposed to the firework that is the Say Report.
And I will say that if you're into conversations about things like "Do you poop in heaven?" an Adam Sandler podcast is probably right up your alley.
Yeah, he makes a good point. My friend Sejohn here, my best friend Sejohn here. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, so come do that. Thanks for listening to this. Sejohn, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this episode before we send it over to Will?
No, be excellent to each other. But you know, you can always hit me up if you have anything else that you want to say about things like the idea that streaming services need to get their shit together, or you know, if you have your own thoughts about whether or not you poop in heaven, you can find me at Siege versus the World.
And if you would like to yell at me about my Spider-Man Miles Morales thoughts, or if you watch more than 4 hours of Family Feud in a day, I need to hear from you. And I'm on Twitter at Devon D. Decker.
Are you okay? We need to make sure.
Yeah, I need to make sure that you're okay, because I've seen what it's done to my father, and I just need to make sure. All right, so as for that, let's send it over to our own unsolved mystery. Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.